welcome to another amazing episode of Say It Online, where we help digital agency owners stop just randomly shouting into the void and start communicating meaningfully and effectively in this digital age. I'm your host, Say Gabriel, and this episode was brought to you by our sponsor, Nancy Content. If you're sick of conversion content being a huge pain in your agency's butt, especially websites, campaigns, etc., let's talk. With the smoothest content process ever, a team of unbelievably skilled and organized content strategists, and years of subcontracting experience, Anansi is looking to make your life as a digital agency owner unbelievably easier. Just head, if you're interested, to anansicontent.com, that's ANANSI content.com, and hit Let's Talk. And now, without further ado, here's our episode. Hello, everybody. We are here today tackling part 4 of our growth strategy series. So part 4 of 4. If you've been tuning in the last few weeks, we've been talking about a whole bunch of stuff. Celene, what have we been talking about?
Well, the first episode, which was at the beginning of the month, we basically broke down what is the difference between a foundation strategy and what a growth strategy is. Then we kind of talked into like a little bit more about like the nuts and bolts of a growth strategy. What is it? What are the components that make it up? Last week we talked about what the growth strategy process is, and now today we're going to talk about how you can actually implement growth strategy as a service in your agency and sell it to your clients. Because it's, you're probably really, really, really excited about this. And if you've been listening to this and you're running an agency, you might be thinking like, oh my goodness, I absolutely need this for my clients. But there's a big gap between being really excited over an idea and like actually implementing it and making money off of it.
Yeah, totally. So things we're going to talk about today include what to do if your current focus is a foundational strategy element. We're going to talk about some kind of different ideas and arrangements, and we're going to talk about some really key points to communicate this to your clients. So I just want to start out here by saying that you can totally implement this even if your current focus is a foundational strategy element like branding or web design. So if you missed our past episode about it, basically super quick breakdown, foundational strategy is something that establishes a reference point or a series of reference points for what makes you unique and memorable, how you solve a certain audience's problems, and basically where and how they can find you and engage with you. Growth strategy is active marketing that is data-driven, focused on continuous improvement. So if you're currently doing branding and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't want to be managing different marketing tactics every single week or every single month, that feels really, really overwhelming. Well, we'll get to that. So don't worry about it. You can still totally do something like this. On the other hand, if you're already doing some sort of growth-driven marketing, so that's basically any marketing where you're tracking data and results and operating on some sort of cycle, you really might benefit from our growth strategy, as a simple framework just to organize the stuff that you're doing. It is totally compatible with basically any project management system. It is just basically a visual strategic tool to help you organize what's happening next. And of course, if you've been dreaming about offering growth-driven marketing as a service, as your primary service, or for recurring revenue, then our framework can make it very, very easy to implement. And we are sharing basically everything, all of our resources online, including a video walkthrough, etc., on the show notes page for this website. So super stoked about that.
Sweet. So for everyone listening who is already kind of focused on offering a foundation strategy, how do they actually start offering this as a service for their clients?
All right. So the easiest way, surprise, is not to go out and hire a whole bunch of new people and overhaul your entire service offering framework. I know that can be very tempting if you're very idea driven, but just that's not the easiest way. You can do it. It's not the easiest way. Basically, the pure, simplest, easiest way is very simply to become a referral partner with another company, ideally who already serves the same market and already offers growth-related services. Of course, you need to make sure you're doing your homework. In particular, make sure that they are tracking and proving the data, metrics, KPIs, whatever you want to call it, Make sure there is real concrete evidence that they are successful, because otherwise, not only will it not work with the growth strategy framework, but how are you going to know? How is your client going to know? Right?
Or if turns out that they like totally suck, it makes you look really bad to your clients for referring them.
Absolutely. And I think we all live in fear of that a little bit. But usually this means you can just arrange some sort of mutual referral bonus. So you don't have to manage the project. You're just saying, hey, we know this awesome company that can really help you take it from here, move on to the next level. Maybe they work in Facebook ads, maybe they work in PPC, maybe they work in just overall marketing strategy. But generally, if you talk and make a deal with them, the kind of going rate that we found is about 10% referral bonus for the first 6 to 12 months if it's an ongoing engagement, which it should be for growth strategy to make it effective. And obviously, you can negotiate this. You can put it in writing. You can put it on paper. You can make it as formal or informal as you like. Quite often, to be honest, we've just done this really informally with people, but we've also set up kind of like complex tracking systems when there's more leads coming through. But the idea is simply that you are entrusting your clients to someone else who does this well. And it is a win-win-win situation for all three parties. Or, you could literally just bask in the adoration of your clients with a great referral. You wouldn't even have to take a referral bonus, but you absolutely need to make sure that they can deliver. And that is just the least overhead, right? All it takes is the time that you spend researching, talking to people, proving, and of course, advocating on their behalf.
So you mentioned that's the easiest way. What are the other kind of options? Because I know this one's super easy. You're basically just offloading it, but you're not really implementing it as a service. You're not, referral aside, you're not really making money off it or actually like directly offering it to your clients. So what other kind of options are there?
Absolutely. So as some of you guys might already be thinking, you can, number 2 and 3, you can either use a subcontracting or white label, right? So this is a situation where someone else, a different company who is a specialist, is still doing the work, but you are responsible for managing at the very least the relationship and sometimes to differing degrees the work. And of course, the third and hardest is to hire in-house and develop a whole new service that you guys are offering. So I'm going to dig into that second one, the growth strategy company to subcontract or white label. So most of you guys probably already know this. White labeling is anonymous subcontracting. So that is quite simply, you're hiring somebody to do work under your company's name. So they are specialists. They usually have their own teams, processes, and systems, but they're willing to work under your company's name so that you can provide more services than you specialize in terms of high value. And we have a whole other episode coming up. I know I've referenced it a lot on different ways to delegate. A white label company is usually what I would call delegating up. So delegating to basically service that is more specialized and better at something than you. Now, this is what we do, right? Like, we are a subcontracting white label company. So surprise, we're not just saying the easiest way to do it is to hire us, because you're still going to be having interactions with your client when you're working with us. So there is that referral. But if you do want to be offering this as a service, if you want to, make a profit off of this beyond just a 10% referral fee, if you want to kind of continue to be the leader and the main point of contact with your clients, then subcontracting, whether it's white label or not, is a really, really good option. Now, I will just put it out there that depending on your company, if you are less than like 15 people, I would suggest you pick 1 or 2 types of growth strategy services. So what I mean by that is that you don't want to have an SEO guy and a conversion copy guy and a PPC guy and a YouTube marketer and a video marketer. Now, definitely you want to have these people maybe as channel partners or in your roster to potentially refer to, but specifically for a subcontracting or white label relationship, you want to minimize your risk and minimize your management time. A company that is supposedly like full service agency that is operating on a white label or subcontracting basis, they have to be a really big company in order to do all of the different specialties that exist in marketing well. And it can be a dangerous rabbit hole to go down there. Even with really big companies, really big white label companies, it can go really well because you have a lot of resources, a lot of practice. They've done a lot of different projects. But I hear often, often of horror stories, or pretty much any time I am hanging out in a group with more than 2 or 3 digital agency owners at a time, where a really large subcontracting or white label service, so when I say really large, I mean like 50 plus, 100 plus employees, where somebody drops the ball or somebody disappears at a critical moment, or maybe you can't get quality of service that you need because maybe it's like outsourced in India. And not to say that people in India can't do amazing work, but depending on the type of service that you're offering, like growth strategy is important, right? Like growth strategy is something that requires complex strategic understanding, and you want to make sure that you're screening appropriately. So you could have a really, really amazing company overseas potentially doing this, but you're going to run into some challenges unless you're also marketing in those overseas audiences or markets, basically. Because yeah, anyway, I could go into a whole other rant about that in a whole other episode, but we're not going to do that right now.
Yeah, and another thing to consider is, most companies that are kind of like a small, medium, even like some kind of medium to large size businesses, they don't need all those different things, right? Like a company who's doing, YouTube videos and content marketing and like who's doing every single thing, that's usually like an enterprise level company that either has in-house marketing or is hiring like the $10 million a year kind of marketing agency that does have like 50 people and offers everything.
Yeah, and I mean, we are huge fans of going deep, not wide. I mean, the whole purpose of the growth strategy, if you've listened to these other episodes, is about focusing your work and making sure that the energy that you're putting in is moving you far forward or really deep, as opposed to a little bit in a whole bunch of different directions. So I just suggest, once again, channel partners, so referral partners. You can have a bunch of different ones, right? Maybe in your strategy, you find out that a lot of people need this particular service. But specifically, if you are going to be managing the client relationship, fewer whole other companies that you have to manage in order to deliver great service that you have to be accountable for to your client, right? If they mess up, it's not them who has to hold that or fix that project or save it. It is ultimately you as the agency leader. Now, some companies, of course, we are a big fan of companies like our own, who maybe are a little bit smaller, a little bit more nimble, but again, who believe in going that deep, not wide. They can go a long way towards helping to manage that client relationship and giving a good experience, or at least we can. To be honest, don't necessarily meet a lot of other companies who approach things in the same in the same way we do, with that kind of depth of service. But we are all basically like strategists, and to some degree, our strategists are entrepreneurs in their own right, so they get it. But once again, I'm kind of wandering off topic here. But really what I'm saying is, as much as possible, go deep, not wide with your growth strategy, including the people that you're choosing to work with. Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. And I keep wanting to like ask you more questions of that, dig into it. I'm like, no, we're going to go down these rabbit holes and they're going to be insane.
We can handle a rabbit hole or two. Why don't you throw one question at me?
It wasn't even necessarily a question. I'm just kind of musing out loud. I'm musing out loud now. I was musing in my head, too, about the client's time of when they have to, the client themselves has to manage and interact with all these white label contractors as well. It's a lot for a client to handle.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, you're reminding me that that's partially how our model evolved, in the sense that we identified very, very quickly that, especially if you're working with a client with multiple stakeholders, it is much better to give them kind of specialized buckets of people to deal with. So for our copy process, for example, and once again, we are a provider of growth strategy rather than someone who is working with another provider. We really just have one person who is the single primary point of contact for the client. Because we have multiple strategists, we have one person who is the single primary point of contact for the companies themselves, right? Who is our account manager. And we just keep it very simple in that way. So they end up, the agency ends up developing a relationship with 2 or more people, depending how many projects we do over how many years. But there's a lot of consistency and predictability. And the client, who is already dealing with a lot of new things, a lot of new people, right?
And running their own company.
Oh, yes, and running their own company. Let's not forget about that. So they only have one content or copy point of contact, which really, really just simplifies and streamlines things. I love as simple as you can make it for your client. Right. That's why high level service frameworks are very effective, right? Just simple, clear at a high level. People can remember 5 overall steps. They may not be able to remember the title of the 100 SOPs within those steps. Likewise, in terms of services you provide, marketing is a vast, 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 massive world. And there are a lot of different ways to get to the same place. At the same time, it is hard to differentiate yourself these days in marketing. It is such a vast world. There's so much going on. We're being hit with so many marketing messages at once that the opportunity to excel in fewer elements of marketing is not one to be forgotten or swept under the rug, in my experience or perspective.
That is so true. So we spent a lot of time on the second option, and no surprise, like this is obviously our area of expertise. But what is the third option that people have for implementing a growth strategy in their agency?
Yeah, absolutely. And the third and hardest is to hire in-house or to develop a new service with the people that you already have in-house. Now, I'm going to maybe contradict myself here a little bit because I really think that unless you intend this to be a core focus of your business, this is a huge risk. It is very resource and energy intensive. And I actually strongly advise against going down this route unless you have a really strong reason to.
Even though we just spent the whole month talking about how to do it for yourself.
Totally. Now, this is different. Like implementing a growth strategy for yourself is one thing, right? And I think that's the best place to start if you're interested in doing this for your clients. I mean, a lot of the time we suffer from, of course, the shoemaker's kids having no shoes or etc. But this is one circumstance where, once again, if you're already doing growth strategy work and you just want to use our framework, that's great. Fully encourage you to. But I do strongly recommend giving it a shot on yourself if you're not comfortable or familiar with the process of like setting metrics, goals, working on a cyclical path to achieve them. Also, just because the wide world of marketing is massive. So, of course, I laugh because not only did we spend the last month talking about this, but we spent all of last year developing this as a service in our agency. We had been doing growth strategy services for years. But when I'm going to be candid. We took a look at it and we're like, this really isn't doing what we want it to do. It's not doing what we want it to do for the business. It's not doing what we want it to do for our clients. We're kind of approaching it. A lot of the time we're finding ourselves being order takers. Okay, this person wants some sort of ongoing blog work. Okay, etc. But there's a difference between doing ongoing work and offering growth strategy as a service, that difference is very clear and simple, which is that when you're doing ongoing content or ongoing services or some sort of recurring revenue, you might be providing value. You might be taking actions that move the company forward, but ultimately you are not accountable for their results. Growth strategy as a concept, whatever you decide to call growth strategy within your business, the thing that makes it what it is, other than the cyclical, continual improvement observation, elements that go into it, is the fact that you, the service provider, are fully accountable for clear, unarguable results. That is a very, very powerful thing. It is also, a mildly terrifying thing and a big thing to start developing in your business because you need to make sure that the people that you have if you're going to use the people on your team, right, you need to make sure that they have the skills that they need. You need to make sure they have the time to learn a new process and roll it out and manage it with clients. You need a system that's going to oversee, organize it. You need to be able to sell that service. Well, you're going to be, even if you're working with a channel partner or something, you're going to be able to sell that service. We're actually going to get to that a little bit on in the episode, some tips for that. But there's a lot of different things that need to go into it, right? Like this is something that realistically we spent the last year developing. We're still developing it, right? Because every month we're working on it. Every week we're working on it for ourselves. We're working on it for clients, and we're adapting it and simplifying it and shifting it and having lots of conversations about it. But realistically, we have been working on this as long as we have been in business. And that's one of the reasons why we've decided to kind of officialize it and give it the same aspect of being highly processed and simplified and, basically systematizing it the way we've done other things. But this was always our dream, right? Our company, we build mutually supportive communities. We use marketing as a force for good. Those are our driving passions. And you can build a really amazing brand. You can write amazing copy for a website. There's so many things you can do. But to me, to be really, really creating that strength that we want to see, we need to be actively forging connections between the organizations and the people who need them. And growth strategy takes that out of the hands of our clients in the sense that they're not the experts, they're not the specialists. Them being accountable for the results, well, that's not why they hired you, right? They hired you because they need someone to help them be accountable for those results. They need someone to bring the specialization. And arguably, I would say they need someone to bring the organization and the tracking. It's not just about being specialized at something. It's being able to make it clear, simple, comprehensible, the results obvious and easy to see for the clients. And that's what this does. So there's a lot of amazing potential there, but it's a lot of work and it's a lot of responsibility. And that responsibility falls on someone on your team. But as the agency leader, ultimately that responsibility does fall on you. No matter who on your team is doing it, right? Ultimately, it's your company.
So TLDR, the third option, we basically spent at least the last year doing it. So now we're recommending you don't do it yourself.
Unless it is also a driving force of your vision.
Yeah, it'll take a lot of time and energy, but it's definitely worth it. It's pretty cool to be able to offer it and to be able, like you said, it's scary and it's a lot of responsibility to be accountable for results, but it's also really empowering and it's really cool to be able to offer that to your clients as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Elements of this and implementing it, they can still revolve around your particular offerings or service, right? And I want to say this to all of you listeners, those of you who are doing foundation services and, interested in providing growth strategy, or maybe you're dabbling in it, but really want to be able to provide those results to your clients, but also to people who are doing growth strategy style services, but kind of chaotically, where you're taking action every month or every week or every quarter. But you're not always 100% clear what you're building towards or what success is going to look like. As well as people who are offering this as a service and maybe, just want to check and make sure they're doing it right, or doing it in a way that's effective. So this goes out to all of you guys. And feel free to use our framework, right? I was talking to a friend and partner of mine who's an agency leader and getting his feedback on this. And he's a marketing brain I deeply respect. And, he was looking at it and he was thinking, he was saying to me, he's like, I already want to kind of adapt this into more of a sheets form and adapt it with the system we're already using and all this different type of stuff. Would that be okay? And I was like, yes, please do. Because that makes it usable for you. And then you can come back and give me feedback and I can, greedily snap it up and implement it. But the framework is not the least part of this. The framework is a huge part of it. So if you are going to be rolling this out, make sure you're either leveraging our framework or using a framework of your own.
Sweet. So I'm just going to basically, because I know we spend a lot of time on each of these, kind of recap the three main ways that agency owners can implement this. And so basically the first way is just to straight up refer it, get it off your plate, refer your clients to an agency who does it, potentially get a referral bonus, which would be good, a little bit of extra revenue. The second option is to subcontract, hire a white label agency that already does this and already kicks butt at this and basically offer it as your agency, but not actually have to do the work other than, like the management or whatever goes along with it. The third option is to completely do this in-house. And I'm also going to add kind of maybe a 3B that you kind of touched on, is if you already offer kind of a growth related service, that you can basically, just start maybe tweaking your process or formalizing your process if this is already kind of close to what you're doing, but you just want to improve what you're doing.
Yeah, well said. Well
Sweet. So now that we've covered how to actually implement it, the kind of last big step, which is one that I get so often from agencies, people say all the time, they're like, wow, this is so amazing. Like, you've explained this so well. This is incredible. I love this. I need to sell this in my agency, but how do I sell it to my clients? Like, how do I get my clients to understand the value of it?
Yeah, that's exactly the response I get when I excitedly share it with partners as well. So this, and I mean, this is straight out of, effective relationship-based sales. It's also straight out of our experience, but our experience, I say Celene is the one who's been having these conversations recently, but it really is to sit down with a client, ask what their goals are, ask what their challenges are that are in the way of those goals, and then talk through together, not talk at them, but talk through with them how a growth strategy can help them get there. There are lots of different elements that make a growth strategy valuable, right? When I'm talking to a partner, often I chat about the aspect of it where we're helping to kind of corral the clients and all of their crazy ideas and their inability to stick to deadlines a lot of the time, and use the growth strategy to kind of, work on that. But as Celene pointed out, and as our strategists are well aware of, the client themselves, that may not be the biggest obstacle in their mind that is stopping them from getting to their goals. It could be something totally unrelated. And taking the time to understand just basically how it works, which, at this point, you've listened to several hours worth of how it works if you've been tuning into these other podcasts. And if you haven't, what are you waiting for? Go check them out. But it really is about understanding who it is that you're talking to, understanding authentically what their problems are, how they relate to other people whose problems that you have solved, and then understanding and framing or highlighting the different elements of the growth strategy that can really be effective for removing those challenges. It turns what is basically a nebulous good idea, something that's kind of abstract, into something that's concrete and relevant for them. And that's really the best way to sell pretty much anything is, first of all, make sure it is appropriate. And if so, make it concrete, make it relatable, right? Like, those two things, specific and relatable, have so much power on their own when there is a true need there, right? This is a true need. This isn't about manipulating people into needing something they don't want. This is about harnessing the need that already exists and creating a channel towards something that will help them thrive.
Totally. So obviously, nothing can replace that kind of face-to-face interaction where you're sitting down and you're explaining to them and you're taking the time and you're building that relationship, you're building that trust, you're getting them excited. You're making sure that the value matches their need, all those sorts of things. But what else can you do? Like, for example, for me, when, cause I've been having these conversations a lot, or, whether it be, for another project or anything, usually I'll sit down with them and then I like to send them, like follow up kind of reference materials or things that, so after they've had the call and they've forgotten about it, or, sometimes I might send them the recording. But maybe they're trying to explain it now to their partner, someone else who wasn't on the call. Like, what else can you do to kind of help sell clients on it?
Awesome. Well, I think you already kind of answered that question a little bit in your own question or your own experience, which is putting together some clear documentation. You don't want to reinvent the wheel every single time as to what the value is for this. Now, I think I want to highlight what you said about your experience. That's not to say that you just email off some information and like wipe your hands. You're like, great, they're going to call me back and want this, right? You are still sitting down with them, talking through it, understanding what's going on for them. If there are resources, often you're walking them through that resource and then sending it as documentation as a follow-up. Now, you can have both internal and external documentation, right? We're fairly, we're fairly transparent about our doing. So, we might have some like notes in our templates and stuff that we use for meetings. But a lot of the time, like what we're sharing is in the documentation. We're just expanding on it already. So it's the same stuff that we're reading off of, presenting off of, and sending it to them. Half the time, and I'm going to be totally candid here because design is something we are just light years ahead on the copy than the design most of the time, right? We don't have a dedicated designer that we work with all the time. I'm almost embarrassed to say, if you want to be that person, contact me. But so we sometimes we're actually just sending out text only documents, and obviously the more jazz you can give it, the better, but it doesn't have to be fancy. It just needs to be clear instead of clever, and focus on value, right? This is just marketing and sales and copywriting 101, which is focus on benefits as opposed to just elements or features. Definitely benefits and value. I would also say use video as well as written. So that could be video like this, where you're sitting down and having that virtual conversation. But when I'm trying to explain something, and I'm trying to give something more than just a resource, I love recording a little video. I love just, 2-3 minutes. You can often break it down so much clearer when you're just having that connection and that energy and that fire and that passion than just shooting off something written, which as more and more people are realizing now in the Corona events that are still going on. But really, there's a lot of room for misunderstanding and error when it comes to pure written text, even when you are super, super good at writing. And that's what I mean, like email and stuff like that, right? When you're on the fly writing. And that's also why it's important to put together this documentation and resources so you can put in the work to make it really, really clear, really, really engaging, and not have to redo that every time. Now, this should include who needs it, right? Who's a good candidate for a growth strategy, what the steps are. So high level process framework, high level service framework, how you approach it. So, your particular attitudes and approach in this at a high level, and why it's valuable, those benefits we talked about. You can also talk about how long the process is, right? One thing we've been working on is kind of showing at different tiers or levels how that affects the speed of growth. Because that's a big thing, right? If you're putting fewer resources into it, usually it will take longer to get traction. You have to take different activities to gain traction quickly. And just a 1 or 2 sentence way of describing it is great. And here is one that you can use, which is that, and this is an overall process, not just the growth strategy, but once you've established basically a minimum viable product or a strong foundation in terms of internet presence, you're going to continuously improve it based on data and observations and strategy. Bam, simple. Right? And if all of this is like, oh God, now I have to go and write a million things and feeling overwhelming, well, coincidentally, we are sharing our FAQ that we share with clients with you. So once again, this isn't super fancy in terms of design. It is just clear copy, but we are sharing it with you, and you can leverage it as you choose. So hopefully that'll make things a bit easier.
Yeah, totally. And I really like what you said about, like walking people through in a video. I didn't mention that in my question, but that is something I do all the time is, a lot of people, myself included, are, visual learners or learn from best from like a combination or absorb information from a combination of media. So if someone kind of sits and explains something to me and talks me through something, I have a really hard time visualizing it. But if someone pulls up, as they talk through it, pulls up an example of what the growth strategy looks like, or some sort of kind of visual reference that I can follow along, it immediately, like, not only am I just much more likely to understand it, but it also gives that kind of next level of authority where you're like, oh, you're not just making this up. Like, you have documents and processes and guides and templates. So it makes it super, super valuable. And then also, when you send it after the fact, they have that context where they've been, like you said, there's no question about it. They've been walked through it. They have the context. They have the explanation. So not only are they more likely to understand it and get it, but they're able to convey that, if they have to talk to a partner about it or a team member or their marketing head or, whoever it may be, they understand it better and they're able to convey it better to the other people in the company.
So. Absolutely. Your call with them is where you generate the excitement, the connection, the fire that fuels the desire to take action on the project, often around those goals, around those possibilities. The documentation is what creates clarity and allows them to bring that fire to other people, basically, and do the same work that you've already done with them with someone else, simply and clearly. Because, like, oh, just to give an example, this morning I was going for a walk, listening to a podcast, and I was just walking, wasn't really taking notes. And they moved through quite a bit of content. They talked about the 4Ds that create, division and stress and despair, and then the 5Ds and the 4Cs, I think it was. And I came back, and I'm trying to talk to my partner at this and talk about it and like share all the different details. And I had the like passion and excitement from listening to it. I was like, I swear this was really valuable and relevant to me. But because I hadn't taken the time to like fully understand the framework, it was kind of like telling a joke badly. Like not telling a bad joke, but telling a joke badly.
That's how I tell all my jokes.
Oh, me too. You would think I'd be really good at telling jokes, but I'm totally that person sometimes. So I'm just like, oh yeah, he talked about this thing and it was funny because it really kind of like turned me off at first. I didn't agree, but then as he got into it, I really related to it. But he got stuck in the kind of turned off part at the beginning because I related that really, really clearly because it was emotional. And once I got into the framework that was actually helpful, I kind of lost him a bit because I was like stumbling over. I was like, oh yeah, so the 5Ds are like doubt and this other one, and then they all lead to divide, but this was the third one. It wasn't as effective. And that was just telling a story, never mind trying to like sell something potentially to a co-partner or something like that.
For sure. So that's obviously when having kind of those written materials can jog their memory, where it was very clear in the call, but there's a whole bunch of new information coming at them. They're not going to remember every detail. But then, if they have kind of some sort of framework or reference, they can be like, oh yeah, it was this, and this. And as they see it, it'll also like jog their memory of the call and everything you told them about that thing on the sheet.
Yeah, absolutely. And something we've been referencing here that I just want to call attention to, if it wasn't clear, is that a growth strategy process is strategy agnostic in the sense that any strategy could be good potentially, but it depends on the project and the skills of the people at hand, etc. But the framework doesn't care. The framework will help clarify and organize no matter what form of marketing in this wide world that you're using. That being said, though, as soon as you have some sort of success story, document it. Because that on its own, right, that also helps convey the excitement to people, the possibilities. And in terms of like authority and creating proof points is very, very valuable. And start documenting it from the beginning, as soon as you start having positive experiences, because that's part of the success story too. You don't always have to be like, oh, we earned this person $1 million. Because that might take you 6 months or a year to earn that person $1 million, right? But if they're having a great experience from day one and you're starting to solve their problems from day one, maybe get an experience interview or a video or a testimonial or something, or start putting together a case study after month 1, not month 12. And you can continue to update it as you go.
That's really good advice. And for anyone listening who loves reading case studies on other people's websites, but isn't really sure how to go about putting one together, excuse me, we actually have a case study planner as well if you just reach out to us.
Yeah, that's true. It would be good. I can't think of a few off the top of my head, but some people do case studies really, really well. So definitely, if you're planning on putting together case studies, use the case study planner, please, but also seek out a few case studies that really resonate for you in your industry if you can, and model them after that. Pretty basic model is what was the challenge, what were the initial observations or approaches, and what were the results as it kept moving, and any reflections from that process. Is fairly simple.
That makes sense. You mentioned that growth strategies are very strategy agnostic. I also just wanted to mention, I don't know if I'm like totally butchering your words or your thoughts, but it's also like service agnostic. So for example, like throughout this whole thing, we've been talking about the growth strategy for like marketing and content and stuff, because that's what we use it for. but you can basically use it for anything you're offering. Like growth strategy, amazing for SEO, where you have your goals, your priorities, you have your next steps of what SEO work you're going to do every month. You can track it, improvements. Like that's like, it's a perfect fit for it. Like branding, like anything that you're doing, a growth strategy can be adapted for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings us to the end of our growth strategy episode. So, the whole series, we've covered a lot of different things. Hopefully at this point, you understand kind of what we're talking about when we say growth strategy, why people might need one, what the components are, how you put it into process, how you sell it, how you implement it. So we've covered a lot of stuff. Did you want to just high level take us through what we covered today in particular?
Yeah. So we started with talking about we started by recapping the whole series a little bit. Now I'm just bringing us like full circle. But we basically talked about, like I said, how to implement this in your agency, who should be doing this, and like what type of service you might already be offering. So we talked about like how you can actually implement this. So either referral, white label, or develop a whole new service in-house. Don't recommend that one unless you really want to focus on it. And then we also talked about how to sell it to your clients. So sitting down with your client and actually taking the time to understand their goals and ask them about their goals, and kind of show them through the framework of the growth strategy how that can help them achieve their goals, as well as having some sort of documentation, whether it be visual, like written video, that you can use to supplement that both in the call and send them afterwards to reference. Did I miss anything? You always do the recaps. I wasn't prepared for this.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I think that covers most of it, right? Just at a high level, what a growth strategy is, it is a means to continuously improve your reach, engagement, conversion, and retention in an intentional and focused way. That is just really what we're doing and what it's about. Honestly, those, if you can explain it really simply, that's kind of the most important thing here. Anyway, thank you for joining us for this series. As always, we would love to hear your perspective. We'd love to hear whether these terms resonate for you or whether you have other terms you'd like to apply to the foundation elements or the growth elements. I'd love to hear whether you've tried to implement a growth strategy in your business at some point, whether it was successful or whether it wasn't. If you're already doing it, did you learn anything? I'd love, if people wanted to share even where things went wrong for you, or if you had anything to add. So you can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube now. You can find us on so many different platforms. Whatever platform you're listening to this on, we would love for you to just comment, share, give us your perspective. We'd love to hear it. If you'd like to talk to me or Celene directly, you can shoot us an email. Celene is Celene at anansicontent.com. That's ANANSI content.com. And I am say at anansicontent.com. So as always, I hope you have an excellent rest of your day. If you are having a crappy day, you are feeling stressed out or overwhelmed, I hope that you can create or find even just a moment today to take a few deep breaths and see if you can harness a little bit of awesomeness, even if it's just for a moment. Anyway, take care. Have a good one. And that does it for another amazing episode of the Say It Online podcast. Join us next week. And don't forget to like and subscribe, whether it's iTunes, whatever your favorite podcast player is. It is always, always appreciated. It really makes a difference for us. It helps us get this word out to more people. As always, this episode was brought to you by our sponsor and Say's own business, Anansi Content. If you're a digital agency owner and you're still wasting too much time chasing down content that maybe isn't even all that great, let's talk. We've spent years working on the best process for selling, planning, and delivering amazing conversion content for your client projects. Better yet, we moosh our process to yours so that your client and you have a seamless and amazing experience the entire time through. If you're interested, just go to our website. That's www.anansicontent.com. That's ANANSI content.com. And just click Let's Talk. I'd love to chat with you. Someone else on the team would also love to chat with you too. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day.